going over how we can integrate some custom Java into our Mendix applications. I wanted to let you guys know that during the webinar, you'll be able to ask questions. You can type them out into the GoToMeeting webinar, and we will address them as we see the time is right to do so. If there are any questions that we don't get to by the end of this, we will answer them after the fact. And then after this, the recording will be available online. The answers to the questions will be available online. So you can download, you can share, send them to various colleagues and individuals that aren't able to join and want to know the content. So everyone taking the time to, myself, Marshall Worster, and I also have Jasper van der Hoek here, both of us on the U.S. Expert Services team, here to tell you a little bit about how we integrate Java, a little bit about the platform, and then do a quick demo. So as far as agenda items, we're going to go over some custom use cases for why we would be using Java. Like I said, a little bit about the platform, how this works, what that means as far as using different kinds of Java libraries, how we incorporate it into our model, and then Jasper is going to take us through a demo of how we can tie all of this together. So the first question that usually comes up is, when is a good time to use or not use custom Java within our application? So usually our most common use are when you need to do very complex data manipulation, so maybe manipulating strings or calculations or date-time type formatting that isn't as easily attainable within microflows. You can extend with custom Java to do that. Do you ever need to do any processes that communicate directly with our runtime through the core API, which we'll discuss briefly? If you need to interface with existing Java-based applications, so if you have other Java apps that you want to communicate with or leverage some of those libraries and functionalities, you have the ability to incorporate that in. And then lastly, and a very big one that we see is leveraging some third-party and open source Java libraries that allow you to extend your application, with things such as Bouncy Castle or Google's Guava libraries that would allow you to use their pre-built functionality and bring that into your Mendix application. So some of you may be very aware of how the stack works in Mendix behind the scenes, but for those of you that don't or would like a refresh, moving the Mendix platform. So the modeler is kind of your entry point to getting into building your application, styling your application, doing everything that you need in order to have your finished product that then is allowed to be accessible by a web client. Once you get under the hood of the actual business server, what you have is really a lot of moving parts, and you have the ability to, as we've highlighted, you have that custom Java, which is an aspect of your project package. So when you go and build a Mendix application, you have the ability to extend everything with and customize with your pages, your microflows, your security domain model, and then your services that can allow you to consume or publish data outside of your application, which all of that you're able to communicate through that client API. But how you further extend this part of the project is through the custom Java, which we will show you, which can communicate with the platform libraries, the core, and really get to the under the hood aspects of the platform. So external Java and libraries, or custom Java and external libraries, there's a lot of things that you need to keep in mind as far as planning to do this and what the best way of going about it is. So the platform on Mendix uses OSGi. So the Java runtime that we have running on the app server has bundles of prepackaged Java files that allow us to have this modular architecture to where you can extend it very easily without getting class loader issues, without running into problems with different versions of libraries because of the OSGi framework and what it provides for us. So it reduces the complexity of having to keep track of a whole lot of different libraries. And it also, like I said, it's a risk reducer. So it allows us to be more flexible. And within these OSGi bundles, it allows us to really only have access to the classes that are predefined as exposed. And so as we use these OSGi-related jar files and libraries, it allows us to update them frequently, change them as far as upgrading different versions and such, with a very encapsulated methodology that doesn't interfere with not the security, but the stabilization of your application. So the fact that we have the ability to do have everything in OSGi, it's a very important concept to remember, that when you are incorporating third-party Java, you want to use the OSGi compatible libraries, or else you have the ability to run into class loader issues with that. So as you can see here, we have really two main OSGi bundles. We have one for the platform and the runtime itself, which has all of the platform libraries in Java, which encapsulates the platform core, the microflow engine, all that stuff that's behind the scenes. Your complementary OSGi bundle that is a part of the project is where we're able to add our own libraries. It's where we're able to incorporate custom Java, and we're able to use our custom Java code in these other OSGi compatible libraries to communicate with the platform through the core API. So the core API is the preset exposed functionality via Java. So what you can do with the core as far as object manipulation, speaking to the runtime, speaking to the microflow engine, all of those things go through the core API. And it's the ability to wrap these in these OSGi bundles that allows you to add more libraries without getting class loader conflicts with the platform itself. So in an example of what this looks like when you're using these third-party, for instance, we use the POI library in some of our Excel importing mechanisms in the Mendix platform. So when we use this OSGi compatible libraries, we have the ability to have not just the one POI library or jar file incorporated into our project, but we may also have another series of OSGi compatible libraries that encapsulate some of the same Java libraries. So the fact is that since we have these dependencies in place here, but we're running in OSGi bundles, we should not get any type of class loader issues, and we're able to have essentially duplicate Java libraries, because the platform will know how to use the OSGi libraries and not get conflicts there. For instance, when we have all these various libraries that underlying frameworks, as long as they're OSGi compatible, everything should be fine. Where you run into issues is if you were to use Java libraries that are not OSGi compatible, because that's then going to cause some class loader issues. So if we were to drop, say, either one of these org Apache xpath.jar or the Apache xml.jar libraries that are also a part of some of our OSGi libraries in the application or in the project, that's where we're going to run into issues. It's going to be very tough to debug, and you're going to run into issues compiling, and maybe even issues at runtime as these libraries are trying to figure out where they need to go. So always keep in mind that when you're going to use third-party libraries, you always need to look for the OSGi compatible ones, and then based on that, you'll be able to incorporate these into your application. So as far as incorporating custom Java, you always have to do what we call a Java action. And now the Java action is something that you can create from within the modeler, and it has to be called from a microflow. So even if your Java action is just going out and calling some other third-party library, or is not necessarily doing anything that you've written out all the code to do, you always have to have a wrapper as a microflow that's going to call the Java, pass any of the specific parameters that you need. You're able to specify the return values. So most commonly, we will return, a Boolean for true, false, as far as did the action complete successfully, and then we should have, and this is something that's not shown here in our picture, but you always want to have ample error handling involved with any custom Java action, so you can get those stack traces out. You can figure out what's going on. But once you've built a Java action, you need to also deploy your application for Eclipse. Eclipse is the IDE that allows us to build onto these custom Java actions, build out all the lines of code that we may need to do to incorporate custom logic. And like I said, lastly, everything has to be implemented within a microflow for you to call this information. So as you all know, you can call a microflow in a myriad of different ways, but any microflow that you have can call a Java action, and then you can customize the Java to do everything that you need it to do. So with all of that information, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn everything over to Jasper, and Jasper is actually going to walk us through a practical example of how we incorporate a third-party library into our application, all the steps that it's going to take to get us there, able to see the results of what he's able to demo here.
Thank you, Marshall. I will be talking you through a scenario where we're going to extend one of our applications with a Java action. The scenario that I'm going to be talking through is a fairly simple case, and where you're going to use Java are probably a little bit more complicated. But what I'm going to show you will cover all the aspects that you have to think about when designing Java, where to find the information, and how to work with the Mendix application. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing or showing you how to make changes in this application. This is the Mendix training portal, and for everybody on the phone who did the introduction or the advanced training, this should be something that is familiar with all of you, because this is the exact application that we use for the advanced class. We have courses with registrations, trainers and trainees, and what I've done is in my application we can also keep track of the grade of our trainees, so we can see how well they've done in the online exam. The thing I want to do is I want to extend this application with some reporting. So when I start my application, I want to be able to look at my app and see how good most of my trainees are doing when they take a test. What is the score? How good are they doing? How bad are they doing? And what is kind of the average, or what's kind of the rate that people are scoring in my application? And when I do that, I want to make sure that when I go to my app, I want to be able to see how good my trainees are. I'm just waiting until the screen is ready for all of you to see. And in this grade reporting, I want to be able to see how good my trainees are doing. Right now, I just have a simple graph that indicates how many people are getting a score on a certain, or how many people are getting a certain score. But I want to get a better idea of how good the people are doing right now. And what I'm going to use for that is that I'm going to use the standard deviation, the median and the mean, to do a better statistical analysis on how good my trainees really are doing. So I can make a nice curve graph later on, which I'm not going to show you during the demo, because that's a webinar about reporting. I'm just going to focus on getting these three numbers in place so I can actually start and do the calculation, get those numbers in place, and prepare that for my report. I could go on Google and try to figure out what the function is and build an extremely complicated microflow to do the calculation to get the standard deviation, because automation is just going over a lot of numbers, getting the square root, and doing a lot of multiplications. But I know that there are libraries in place that do this for me. And I know that I can simply go to Google and search on Java library for the standard deviation and go through these items and try to find the library that actually allows me to do this. Well, when I look at these results, one of the libraries I am fond of is, when I look at these results, I do see several hits. And in these hits, I see one item I definitely like. That is the item that renders, or this Apache.org libraries that give me good suggestions. So that's what I'm going to look at, and that can give me the information that I need for this library. And further down, I have some example code explaining how to do that. And Apache always has a great download list with all the libraries that are compatible, all the libraries that are in place for me to use. I can simply go to the downloads and get the latest version of this library and grab the binary and start using that for my project. So this allows me to get the right information, give me the library that I need to do the calculation, and incorporate that in my project. Using this library is as simple as identifying what I need and showing all the stuff that I need for this project. And this library is a zip file that when I go in there and look at the downloads, it has a jar file in it. All I need to do to actually use this jar file is I simply extract this folder into the project that I am using right now. Go to the directory where I have my project, which is on C, Mendix, and I just extract that jar file into the userlib folder for this particular project. If I click OK, it will copy that jar file into this location where I have my project right now. And in my project, I now can check that this jar is available. When I look into this project directory, I can see that there are libraries available in the userlib folder. And as soon as I start programming those in Eclipse, that in the userlib there are several items available that I can see. Currently, I already have 6 items. These came from the App Services module, and the one that I just added is the Commons Map 3-3.5. That's what I just downloaded. And obviously I prepared the webinar, so I know this fits my needs. You can just load the jar, play around with it, see if it works. If it doesn't, just delete it again. Try to keep this folder as clean as possible. The more you add here, the slower your project becomes when starting, the more memory it consumes. So you can just add whatever you want in here. Just be careful that if you no longer need it, delete it. Just that makes your project quicker when starting or interacting with anything in your application. So I have everything in place now to get started with my application. So what I want to make sure to do now is that I actually can do that calculation, can actually get the standard deviation for my grades. Before this webinar, I already made a folder that has some of the score reporting processes in place. These have 3 items. One of them is the earlier in my web browser, where I see the 3 numbers, the simple charts, graph, and a button to calculate. In this button, I have a microflow that is already attached, and this microflow is already prepared for me to reset the median, standard deviation, and the mean back to 0. It retrieves all the registrations in my application, and is actually start programming my Java to do a calculation based on these registrations. So I'm going to add an activity to this microflow and start with the calculation of my standard deviation. So I've added the activity, and now I'm going to create a new Java action, calculate the standard deviation, and add 2 parameters, my score object, so I can actually set the results of my standard deviation in the score, and I'm going to pass a list of all the registrations that I have in my application. Reason why I'm passing all these registrations into my application instead of retrieving it in my Java is so I can keep as much of the logic as possible in my microflow. I want to make sure that when I do something, when I build a Java action, that I still try to keep as much as the logic, as much as the functionality in my microflow as possible. We have a visual tool, so I always try to leverage as much as I can using my microflow, and just keep that has the score, since I need to store multiple values, and the registration list. If I would have had a calculation and I would have only needed one of those, I would probably not even pass the score, and I would just return the. Right now, in my example, I want to do multiple calculations and store multiple values in the score, so I'm just going to do all of that in my Java action. So when I save the Java action, pass in the parameters for my score and my registration list, I have a Java action that can call the standard deviation, or can calculate standard deviation. Well, obviously, if I would start this application right now and run this microflow, this Java action doesn't do anything yet. Currently, it will throw a not implemented exception because I haven't implemented it yet. So that's the next step. I need to start programming this Java action into Eclipse and start building in the logic to actually do this calculation. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need to deploy my project for Eclipse. Under the menu item project, there's an item, or you can press the shortcut F6, and the modeler will then pre-generate all the configuration necessary for Eclipse to run. So it will deploy the entire project, it will prepare all the, and it will set up all the configuration that Eclipse needs. Simply press the button and it will do everything for me. And my project is now ready to start programming in Eclipse. Every time I make any changes in my microflows, my pages, anything in my model, and I want to use that in my coding, I always press the button F6, deploy for Eclipse, to refresh that configuration, and it's ready for me to start programming. So let's jump over to Eclipse and take a look at how we can actually load the application into Eclipse. This Eclipse installation, you see a lot of projects in there already. That's because I've been using it for a long time. But you can simply download the latest default version of Eclipse, and you don't need to make it Mendix compatible. All the recent versions of Eclipse are compatible with the Mendix platform, with the configuration. And what I'm going to do now is in Eclipse, I am going to import the project. You want to make sure that you do not press New Project, because that will create a whole new configuration. But since the modeler already created all the configuration for me, I can just import the configuration, the settings that the modeler has already set up for me. If I click Import, I want to choose the option under General, Existing Projects into Workspace. That means that in the directory that I'm going to choose later, Eclipse will search for the configuration that is already there. I'm just going to click Next, and I'm going to browse through the project directory. So if I click Browse, I get the same folder structure again, and when I go to my Mendix training portal, the same folder that we've worked on earlier, if I click OK, it already recognizes the configuration here. If you don't see it, you probably selected either the wrong folder or you forgot to press F6 to deploy for Eclipse. So if you just refresh, then it will probably show up later. I have everything here. I want to use the Mendix portal run configuration, and when I press Finish in here, since alphabetically I see it at the bottom, I will see the Mendix portal menu item show up. This is this project, and it has all the configuration I need for my application. We can see the Java source folder, and we can also see the 6 jar files that we saw earlier in the user lib folder, and they will render properly. And when I go into my Java source to training module actions, because that's where I created my Java, I will see my Java action here. All these folders that I have here right now are the modules that I have. I have the action folder where my action is located that I've just created, and I also have a folder for datasets and proxies. I'll get back to the proxies in a minute. Let's first take a look at the action that has been created by the modeler. If I double click, it opens the Java action. Look at all the information that is being passed into my Java class. I am going to go full screen now, so we have a little bit more real estate. In Eclipse, that's an Alt Control M will show the entire page full screen. That way you can actually follow everything much easier than I'm going to do right now. In this action, a lot of code has already been generated for me, and I need to be careful where and what I am actually changing, because every time I deploy my application, the modeler will rewrite this file. The only places where I should make any changes is between this line of comment and that line of comment, and between these 2 lines of comments. So I can go in, delete that line, and say return true, and that way my Java action will compile, and every time I do my calculation, my Java action will simply return true, and it won't give an exception. We want to do more than that, and that's what I'm going to write between these 2 lines of comments. That will guarantee that I will never get any, or I never lose my code. You can write as much code as you want between these 2 lines of comments as you can think of. Obviously, you want to keep it clear for yourself as well, and you probably want to introduce additional functions to do this. If you want to introduce extra functions, do that between these 2 lines of code. You can add any function you want in here, and the modeler will just leave that, and every time you deploy, this code is remaining untouched. If I grab this piece of code and place it right there, outside of my lines of comments, the next time I deploy, the modeler will delete this stuff, and you would lose your function. So be careful of that. So make sure you only program within these lines of comments. Only that is in this comment and is still being kept are the items that we actually import. So in a moment I'm going to do the programming, and I need to import some Java classes. Those import actions will be kept by the modeler, so you don't have to worry about that. Other items I have here in the modeler or in the Java action that I need are these 4 variables. The modeler pre-generated these 4 private variables in the class that I can use for my custom coding. I have score object with a couple of underscores, score object without underscore, and the same for my registration list, 2 versions of those. One of them is an Mendix object, and the other one is training proxies score. The proxy classes that we see here are the same items that we can find in the subfolder proxies. In that subfolder, we can see get easy access to all the information of that entity. This will make programming for a lot of people a lot easier, because if I want to set the score of my entity, I can simply go to the function set median, and this proxy class will do all the information, set all the information for me. And when I go into my Java, when I look at this, I can easily get access to all the information that I need. So in my user code, I'm now going to program. I know how to program it because I have the Apache page, and I've already looked at the page on Apache, so I already know what to do there. So I don't have to go into the documentation anymore of Apache library. I can just go into Eclipse. I don't need to do my research here. So I just stay in Eclipse, and I'll show you how to do the coding. In here, I need to include the class that can actually do the calculation of the standard deviation. This class is called descriptive statistics. I know that because I've already did my research on the documentation page, but you should be able to find that same information on the examples on the Apache website. This class is ORG's Apache Commons Math 3, which is the same thing that we saw in our user lib. That is what we just imported. This allows me to collect all the statistics. And by creating a new instance of this class, a new variable, I can now collect my statistics. These statistics can simply be collected in this class, and some of the functions I have is adding values. What I need to do to work and get the standard deviation is I need to look into my registration list, grab all the grades from my registration, add the value into this descriptive statistic class, and once I've done that, this class is able to give me a ton of statistical measurements. I can get the maximum value. Hey, this is what we were looking for. I can get the standard deviation, and I also have the median in here somewhere, but I didn't see that right now. So that's what we're going to do next. We are going to start and collect all the grades from the registration list and add the value into statistics class. So I need to do that using a iterator. Well, I'm going to assume that you have basic Java knowledge when you're on this webinar, so I won't explain how iterators work and how all those Java constructs work. So I'm just going to program that for loop to iterate registration list. So for each item in my registration list, I am going to create a new instance of a registration. This will allow me, for every registration item in the registration list, it will execute this piece of code. And my registration variable is now available for me in this for loop, and I can simply look at the functions and see that I can get the course price, I can get the title, the date, the discount, and if I scroll further down, I should ultimately, I missed get score somewhere. Anyway, there it is, to get a grade. So I can get the, which is an integer. So this creates an integer to get the grade. And all I need to do now is add that value into my statistics class. So I can simply say add the grade into the add value function and add the value to my descriptive statistics. After that, I now should have all the information into this class as I need. So what I'm going to do now is I am actually going to get the mean, get the standard deviation, get the percentile, to store that into my action. So I need to get the mean, and this mean returns a double, so that is what I'm going to create as a variable. So I have the double, mean is the outcome of get mean, and I'm going to do the same thing for standard deviation and for the median. Get standard deviation and get, where is the median? There we go. To get the median, I need to get the percentile of 50%. And again, this is all explained on the library page on how these functions actually work. I know this will give me the median because I've already read up on that in preparation to this webinar. These three values now need to be set into my score entity. So I can now look into my score object, the one that I passed. And if I look at my score object, I have several functions to set these values. So if I want to store the mean into my score, I set mean and pass in the mean. And I'm going to do the same thing for all three. Set median and set standard deviation. So I am just going to type that right now, standard deviation and median. And now my function should work. Just as you would do in the browser, is make sure that you refresh your entity as well. If you have a change activity, always make sure that when you change an entity, you want to refresh. So I either need to make sure that I do that in my modeler. In this case, I have done that as well. In preparation, I have a change activity with my refreshing client set to yes. So do that in Eclipse. So if I didn't have the change activity, I could do that here as well. And if you want to do any feedback to the browser, we have to do that through the feedback helper class. The feedback helper will allow me to send specific instructions to the browser. What I want to do is I want to add a refresh instruction to tell the browser to refresh a specific object. In order to tell that, I just set the function add refresh object feedback. I pass in the context and a Mendix identifier, and the browser, the platform will then know what to send to the browser. This has the same end result as the checkbox, refresh in client yes. I need to pass as argument 0, I need to pass the context. Eclipse already gives me a hint here, get context, and this is a function that is always available in every single Java action, which gives me back the iContext class. The iContext class is the context of your action and is basically a collection of all the relevant data in your project. It has information about entities that you're working on, information about your cache, your session, which button has been clicked. So all the information that is communicated throughout the microflow automatically is stored into this context class. That's why most of the actions that we are going to call need to have this context, since that's the necessary information in the project. Or sorry, in your action, not the project. Argument number 1 was a Mendix identifier. Every object has an identifier, which you would also see when you would debug. There's an ID list. That is the number I need to make sure that I pass into this refresh object feedback class. And when I do that, I can get that from my score, saying this dot score dot Mendix object dot get ID. Are always available on every single proxy, and you can always use them in your application. And these proxies are all, these functions are all explained in our Java documentation online. So on developer.mendix.com, there's a menu item for APIs, and that should also point you to the Java documentation of the platform explaining which functions you have available. So let's take a look at starting my project. I'm going to start my project, and I am going to debug my MX training portal, just to show you that you can also debug both from the modeler and from Eclipse. Training portal in here because the modeler generated everything for me that I need. If I click that button, the Mendix platform will then compiling all the information that I need. So I see some text running, some orange text pops over my screen, and I just need to wait a few seconds until my application actually starts. And there we have the Mendix console log pop-up. This is the same information as we have in the console tab in the modeler. In here I can see all the log that passes by, and I can track what is happening in my application. So let's take a look at the app to see if it actually worked. If I refresh my application, I get my login screen again. I sign in as MX admin, and I can go to my grade reporting action. And when I click the calculate button, we have numbers. So we were successful with our Java. And I'm pretty sure that these numbers are about accurate of that's what I would expect right here. So I know that these are successful. If they're not successful, if you think they're wrong, we can always go into Eclipse and start at a breakpoint, just like you would do in the modeler. Add that breakpoint and click the button again, and Eclipse allows me to start debugging through my code. It could also happen that my issue is in the modeler. Well, we also have the ability to debug the modeler. I'm just going to run this breakpoint so I can show you how to debug stuff from the modeler as well. That's also very easy. It still works the same way. You add a breakpoint, but we do one extra step. In the debugger, we are going to connect the debugger to the application because we need to instruct the model. And it is a local app. It is running in Eclipse. I click OK, and it's now connected. When I go back to my browser and click the calculate button, in the modeler, I can just debug as you are already used to. Just a regular way of debugging. And if I would go further, I can even click step over here, and then it would jump back into Eclipse, and I can debug my Eclipse code and compare that to all the variables that exist in my microflow. So even though I'm starting from Eclipse, even though all the information is only available in this Mendix console, I can still get access to all the information that I need. I hope that all this information is very useful to you, and I'm just going to give the floor to any questions that are available from the people on the phone. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type them right now into the question window of the webinar, and we will go through them and answer those questions.
Excellent. Awesome stuff, Jasper. Thank you very much. As we mentioned, you do have the portal there to ask specific questions about implementation and how we can do all these various extensions. We do have a couple that have popped in. So the first one we have is regarding the version of Eclipse that we should be using. So do you need the Java ID for Java developers, or do you need the Java EE? I believe you should be just fine with the Java Eclipse IDE. Is that correct, Jasper?
Yes, the standard Java implementation of Eclipse is more than enough, unless you want to do really fancy things and build your own OSGi bundles. Then you might be better off with the Java EE version. But for the majority of our community, if you just want to program a Java action, just get the standard latest version of Eclipse without all the fancy bells and whistles. It should be more than enough for you to get your Java working.
Perfect. We have another question about in regards to the Mendix feedback function from Java. So that when Jasper went over that, that was a way for your Java action to act the same way as a change object activity in a microflow. So whenever you do a change activity in a microflow, you have the ability to specify the option of refresh in client, true or false. This feedback function within Java allows you to have that same interoperability with the browser to refresh the object on the page. As Jasper, when he hit the calculate button, it automatically refreshes those values. And the reason we were able to do that is because the Java action sent that command to the user interface.
In addition to that, the reason why I just wanted to mention that is because the refresh is probably something you won't use too often. But the feedback helper is the class that allows you to do all the client-specific actions. In the modeler, when you select a type of action, there's that subject client, which has the close page, download file instruction, show home page, all the actions that you are probably familiar with that can interact with the browser. Those activities, those particular actions are all accessible in Java as well. And the way how you can access them is through the feedback helper class. So anything you can do in microflow, you can obviously do in Java as well. So if you want to refresh an object, if you want to close the page, show a page, you can do that in the modeler for most cases. Keep as much the modeler as possible. But if you want to do it in Java, you have that ability through the feedback helper.
Excellent. Another question we have is IntelliJ IDEA also an option as far as using that to build your Java?
So you can program Java in any EDISU if you'd like. You can do it in Eclipse. I've colleagues that prefer NetBeans over Eclipse. IntelliJ, you can do that too. However, the modeler only exports the run configuration for Eclipse. And the Mendix needs quite a lot of settings to get started. So you would have to manually copy those into IntelliJ, or I'm not that familiar with IntelliJ, so it might have a option to import an Eclipse configuration. If that is available, that works too. but the platform only prepares the run configurations for Eclipse, and anything else is something you have to do by hand.
Okay, so a few more that have been coming in. A pretty basic question, but I know this is one that, of course, some of our more junior developers have. But how can you best understand if your libraries are OSGi compatible or not when you're going and downloading them from various distributors?
Searching OSGi compatible libraries is just doing a lot of research on Google and a lot of research on forums. Most of the Apache libraries that we have are compatible with your actions. What you should be aware of is that unless a provider specifies that it's OSGi compatible, it is probably not. And that's not a bad thing. I know that this math library is not an OSGi library, but I also know that this particular library, I've never seen that being bundled in an OSGi library. So the chances that this particular math library will give a conflict, it's almost zero. So you have to do the research and figure out what is bundled in my OSGi library, and you need to research, is this library compatible? And most of the providers say that on their documentation in their specifications. And if you're not sure, just ask it on the forum, and there's plenty of people that can probably help you out with the impact there.
Excellent. Thank you, Jasper, for that. As we mentioned, there are kind of a limitless possibility for what you can incorporate in there as far as those libraries. So you definitely want to understand what you currently have as far as the libraries in your project, and then any addition add in there, just make there. Jasper, if you do get class loader issues based on the various libraries that you have in your project, what's the easiest way to identify what the culprit is going to be whenever you're running into those types of issues?
Finding issues with class loaders can always be a difficult problem. First thing you want to do is you want to go into your userlib folder, any duplications that may or be in that folder. It can very well happen that over time you download an old module, or that an App Store module, for example, is upgraded with a new version of a library. You want to get rid of the old version. So you want to make sure that you go to your userlib and identify that there are no duplications in there. Once you've done that and you still get a class loader issue, it is best to Google on that particular class and search on Google which library actually bundles that particular class that gives the conflict. And from that point on, you will get a couple of hits that you may have in your userlib folder. And those hits are the ones you should research whether or not they're OSGi compatible. If they are not, Google on those particular ones to find the OSGi compatible version.
We do have another question about, a lot of our platform and a lot of the code that's managing the runtime is also written in Scala. So we do have a question about asking, in the future, will Scala also be supported for customers?
Yeah, so right now, like Marshall said, the platform is mostly is a combination of Java and Scala, and they're both highly compatible, so you have that ability to use them. However, currently the modeler only does a Java compilation step on startup. So at this point, if you would add Scala, the platform doesn't automatically does the compilation and adds that to the project. At this time, there's no plan to add Scala as a part of it. But always, if there's a need, if people think that Scala is the option, please feel free to express that through our support portal, ask for that feature. Because if nobody asks for Scala, then R&D won't see the need to add that as a feature.
Right. So everyone who has, a Mendix account has the ability to put in feature requests and start those types of conversations as well in the forum. So I definitely encourage folks that have ideas of how they want to incorporate some of these technologies such as Scala into their custom extensions it's a great way to start those conversations on the forum, because that not only gets a conversation amongst other developers out in the community, but it also engages you directly with our R&D department, who is building out the runtime, who is looking for our strategic initiatives going forward, and who is ultimately managing the product and where we go in the future. So I definitely encourage everyone to go out there and communicate and have those conversations. As we're really closing in on the hour, we have a few more questions that we weren't able to get to. I do apologize for that. What I do encourage once again is, if we weren't able to get to your question today, please go out to the forum, put something out there, and we will go out and address these after the fact. I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to dedicate to this today. As I mentioned, the recording will be online shortly, that you can download it, send the link to whoever may have missed this that wanted to attend. And if you have any follow-up questions, like, the forum's a great place, or reach out to Jasper or I. We're always happy to point you in the right direction. Thank you so much.